Kate Middleton was once upon a time just a regular girl born into a regular middle-class family. But something happened along the way that made her make a massive transformation, and as a result, she was then able to catch Prince William and marry him. But what did she do exactly? Well, ladies, I'm going to tell you all because I want you to take notes so that you stay right through towards the end of today's story time, because I know that Kate's story might seem unattainable at first to some of you, but I am going to break down for you exactly what she did so that you can apply the same lessons in your journey. My dear elegant ladies, welcome back to another video. Ladies, today we have a very special video because I'm going to give you a story time about Kate Middleton's transformation from her being a regular girl, well, regular, to becoming a future queen. Ladies, I have personally always admired Kate, and I would even go so far to say that her upgrade is really the ultimate transformation. And I'm going to give you a little teaser already, because do you know what is actually the secret to her success? Well, ladies, the secret is networking, and I'm going to tell you exactly how she did it and how you can apply the same tricks into your own life. But ladies, before we get into the topic, I do know that Kate Middleton has a proper title, which is Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to address her as Kate. So ladies, bring your popcorn out or a little cup of tea, and let's begin today's story time. Now let's get into the background because this is actually incredibly interesting, so listen up. Now, you know that Kate Middleton is now the Duchess of Cambridge, and she will take on the title of Queen Consort when her husband, who is now Prince William, becomes a king. I can go as far to say that she is firmly placed now in the aristocracy, but it hasn't always been the case. And this is what's going to become really interesting in today's video, because breaking into the circles of aristocracy is actually incredibly difficult, and especially if you are in the UK. I'm going to give an introduction to her background and class to set the scene for this story, because the topic needs really a whole video on its own to explain. So I'm only going to lightly touch on the class just to explain the kind of significance of a privileged but middle-class girl who is to become the future queen. So let's begin with the fun fact that social structure is really nuanced in the UK and actually remains quite rigid than other places and countries. You see, society remains really all about family connections in the UK compared to places like the US and other areas where it's much more to do with wealth. Certainly, family and connections, they pretty much matter everywhere you go, but nowhere more so than in Britain, ladies. So that's a big obstacle number one already there. But if we go back to the very beginning, Kate was born in Reading in Berkshire in 1982, which is just outside of London. Her parents are Michael and Carol Middleton, and she has two siblings called James and Pippa. Carol, Kate's mother, came from a modest background, and her family is what you can call typical blue-collar workers with builders and coal miners in their heritage. But Kate's mother always wanted to become a teacher, but unfortunately her family could not support to put her through higher education. Instead, Carol worked in secretarial roles and eventually became a stewardess with British Airways, where she actually met her future husband. And I would say this is the first part of where the actual upgrade began, of Carol marrying up by finding this pilot that became her husband. So Michael, Kate's father, came definitely from a more privileged background than Carol. His family had relative wealth and historic ties to the aristocracy, with ancestors who were landed gentry. So following in the family tradition, Michael was educated at a private school and he carried on to become a pilot. So certainly he was privileged and he had a decent pedigree, but by only middle-class standards, I would say. The Middletons were by no means a part of the British elite by Kate's father generation, even though he had a more privileged background than Carol. Ladies, I'm explaining all of this for you because it's important to understand Kate's family background to show just how far she had to network to the top to actually get into the elite inner circles. You know, Kate's father comes from a more privileged background, and certainly he had ancestors who mixed with the aristocracy, but Michael personally did not mix in any elite circles. It's very important to point that out. So they still had to start from scratch, meaning Carol and Michael had to upgrade just like any other middle-class family to try to access the elite. And please keep in mind, ladies, that Kate's mother came from a very modest background. So they had to basically upgrade as a couple to level up and upgrade their social status, especially the mother's social status. But what we can see already, ladies, is that for her mother, it was already an upgrade because she married up. She was just a stewardess, but she was able to marry a pilot with some form of pedigree. So what happened next as the couple kept upgrading themselves? Well, as a couple, they were able to create some form of wealth because they opened an entertaining supplies firm called Party Pieces in 1987. And although it was actually Carol who did the majority of the work on the startup from home because Michael was still working as a pilot, but it led him to actually eventually leave British Airways 2 years later to focus full time on their new family business. This investment in themselves, in their upgrade, was a very clever move because the family eventually became multimillionaires from the success of their company, but also because of an inheritance from Michael's family. But despite their success, ladies, they were still a long way from the inner circles of the British royal family because it's not just about becoming a self-made millionaire. You need much more than that to get your foot in. It's definitely not easy because one thing that you need to know is that being part of the aristocracy doesn't always mean that you are wealthy and therefore you get in. You see, wealth comes and goes, and some aristocrats even end up being very cash poor. So it's not really about the actual money. It's more about the pedigree, it's more about the connections. So Carol and Michael at this level had gained a bit of wealth. We can certainly call them affluent at this stage. But in UK, where connections are everything, so if you want to be part of the inner circle of the elite, they were still qualified or considered as middle class, even though they had achieved quite a bit already. I think this can paint the picture for you that it's not really just a Cinderella story. Even though not being aristocratic, the family was kind of just self-made millionaires. I think that's a great achievement, but in some circles, unfortunately, that's not enough. I would say that Kate isn't just a commoner. Though she was described as one in the press early on in her relationship with William, you have to understand that she still went to posh schools. She still did go to a very prestigious university, and she and her family, they certainly had to work their way into very well-connected surroundings. So yes, she wasn't just a commoner. There was loads of work involved, but what I find inspiring with this type of work is that, you know what? Anyone can do it. It's all about really getting it done and understanding what path you have to go. So going back to the story, all this gave them the right access that they needed so that they could place themselves in the elite surroundings, make the right connections, and plant the right seeds that Kate later would harvest. And let me tell you, she certainly harvested big, right? I want you to understand what I mean when I talk about getting a return on your investment. You have heard me talk about it so much everywhere in all my platforms and teachings. But really, ladies, here we have such a great examples because the Middleton's success with their business venture allowed the parents to invest in their kids' future. Okay? By sending them to prestigious schools. Understand how important that is in this context. The family, of course, also invested in themselves by other means, such as moving into affluent areas, buying beautiful homes that would really put them on the radar as being part of the elite. And you know, all of these things, they add up, and it's important. It's not just one piece of the puzzle that kind of have to stick, it's loads of small little pieces. So lesson number 1 to any future parents out there: send your children to private schools if you can, because that's going to set them up for many great things in the future. And it might even benefit you as a parent too. I have spoken about the power of networking through your education so much, and I think the lesson with the Kate success shows it clearly, how if you surround yourself with the elite, you gain access to the elite. And it's way easier to do so through education, because networking just becomes much more organic in such a setting. Now, let me also explain how this can be relevant to your life and your journey, because I know that many of you have probably finished your school years. However, if you were not able to attend any elite schools to network at a young age or so, you can still actually use this lesson at another time in your life, because it's never really too late to upgrade your surroundings. You can always upgrade where you work, where you socialize, the circles you move in, and where you live. Of course, there are many more things you can upgrade than just that, but that was some basics. Because your surroundings really have the ability to either lift you up or take you down. So choose the better option, ladies. Even if it's difficult or seems out of reach or takes time to achieve. You see, Kate's situation was ideal because she upgraded with her whole family from a very young age. She wasn't just alone doing this, she had that support as well. So whatever your current circumstances are, the lessons are really universal, and it will work for you or anyone, no matter where you are or whatever background you have. Now, I can't promise you will catch a prince, but you will certainly be able to achieve any other goals that you might set for yourself. Now, let's talk about the university years, because we're going to go back to the long-standing rumors about Carol Middleton planning the rise of her family and her children. And I will also add that I personally don't see anything wrong with working towards a better life, and I think it's lovely that the Middletons worked on this as a family. So there is one interesting detail, and that is that a common story is that Carol actually encouraged Kate to attend the University of St. Andrews when it was announced that William was going to attend. It is considered a very prestigious school, but apparently it wasn't actually Kate's original top choice. It was actually rumored that she took a gap year just so that she could start at the same time as William. And some media figures have asked if their meetings was actually such a coincidence. Only the Middletons, I think, know what really happened. Did they really orchestrate this whole thing that their eldest daughter would meet the future king at university? Or was she able to mix with the future king because of a lifetime of upgrading done by the family that already placed her in more elite circumstances? I don't know. Now let us return to the University of St. Andrews in 2001, because there were two other potential coincidences that actually put Kate and William in each other's vicinity. They were both allocated rooms in the same hall of residence and initially signed up for the same course of art history. I don't know, ladies. Is this all coincidence or not? Who knows? But as a little side note, you can always work your way around to make things like this happen if you really want something. Not implying that that's what Kate did, just saying that, you know what? In life, anything is possible, and with the right mindset, ladies, it can take you anywhere you want. So it was also reported that William did not adjust particularly well to university life. Kate had worked her way into his circle of friends by this stage and convinced him to stay on. He did stay, but changed his course to geography, and him and Kate became close enough friends that they actually moved into a student house with some other friends together for their second year of university in 2002. Now, ladies, that's where I would say the magic is starting to happen, because now they're actually living together. Well, you know, as kind of roomies. But ladies, getting here was all thanks to placing yourself in the right locations, meeting the right people at the right time, and playing your cards right to be able to keep going strong. Now, I couldn't talk about Kate and William's time at university without mentioning the very important student charity fashion show where Kate famously wore a very sheer dress later in 2002. That was a very clever move of Kate, in my opinion, because numerous reports indicated that that is how she actually caught his attention from just being the friend to, well, you know, to what? You see, by this stage, they had been in the same social circle in the first year of university, so they were friends, and I'm sure they had a good friendship going on. But I think that Kate, at this level, wanted to somehow, in a very clever way, advertise that she could be more than just a friend. And this, ladies, is a mini lesson for all of you, because sometimes you actually need to advertise yourself in a bold way to put yourself on the map. But what's important, though, is to really make sure that if you do so, do it cleverly, with good taste, and make sure it does not backfire to you in any form of ways. Also, a little FYI, I need to point out that Kate had a boyfriend at that time, by the way, which is sometimes not necessarily a bad thing if you want to catch the attention of another guy. Because let's be honest, basic psychology 101 shows that when you cannot have something, you sometimes want it a little bit more than you would otherwise. We all know that. We always want to have something that we cannot have. Now, we don't know what really happened, of course, because a lot of the information is private and it's part of their private story. But eventually, Kate and William did get closer and they did begin a relationship in private at some point in 2003. Kate had already left her boyfriend back then, just a little FYI as well. And their relationship went public in 2004 after a ski holiday to Switzerland. That's when they were famously photographed together at their graduation in 2005. Whew, that was already a lot, but just so that you know, this is just the beginning. Even though up until this point, it has already been a long journey, loads of prep work, loads of investment. You know, the parents were already upgrading themselves before Kate was even born. So certainly, Kate have been hopping over many hurdles to catch her prince up until this stage. But hold your horses, ladies, because now is when Kate really had to start practicing her endurance. You see, the higher you aim in life, the tougher the journey is going to be. That's just the mystical part of life. Why is it like that? Who knows? But you can do it with the right level of endurance. And endurance is something that is very important to think about, especially now as I talk a little bit more about the remaining parts of Kate's story, because this is when she needed to really gather her strength and ask herself, how badly do I want this? Probably badly enough, because the endurance was strong. So after graduation, William was obliged to begin the army training in accordance with the royal family tradition. So Kate returned home and began working as a party planner for her family company. I guess the graduation perhaps put a little bit of a test for them, but Kate was still appearing together with Kate Williams. Kate Williams, did I just say that? Sorry. But Kate began to appear with William at increasingly important events. The Middleton family even was invited to William Sandhurst Military Academy graduation in 2006, which showed that the relationship was serious. Despite going from kind of strength to strength in the relationship to this point, there were many points where they were tested. However, there seemed to be a bit of a cooling off period in early 2007. And it was reported that this was due to the part in their physical distance, because William was doing this military service that really took him away for longer periods of time, as well as I'm sure he had very intense pressures from the media, yet he was, you know, this young bachelor. So it became quite obvious that because of the media coverage that he was not really ready to commit, and they had now been together for quite some time. And on top of it, he repeatedly humiliated Kate by being photographed with other women in clubs whilst, being out with his military friends. Not the most elegant move by William. He also backed out of their plans and reportedly went out clubbing when he returned to London on a weekend without her, despite that they had been separated for weeks due to his army posting. So, loads going on there, a lot of ups and downs, and unfortunately, Kate and William broke up in April 2007. I would say perhaps William was a little bit of a bad boy at that time, but what made him really bad was when he called Kate at work to end the relationship. Not in person, called her at work. Anyway, although she was seen taking the phone call in the parking lot outside her work, she showed dignity and she showed grace by quietly taking the rest of the day off and going home to cope with what would have been extreme heartbreak. But she did it in private. No tantrums, no public tears. She just took the day off and went hiding, which is a great move, by the way. Take notes. So the couple appeared to be back on again by July of that year after Kate attended a themed party at William's barracks. Both commented at their engagement interview that in retrospect, the time apart was actually good for them to get some space and, get some thinking going and just, take some time for themselves to really understand what they're valuing. But what question comes to me is that, was Kate really playing her cards right during this challenging times? I mean, how she felt privately, and I'm sure she was heartbroken, she never showed it publicly, which is already a very big cookie point to Kate, as this is exactly what the royal house looks for in a future queen. Discretion is key. She also does come across as putting herself first instead of moping about the end of her romance with the world's most eligible bachelor, because what she did was that she went out, she had her fun, she was photographed out with her friends and even other men at events and at clubs. So she always had like this fun smile on her face, and for a little while even appeared to dress in a more fun way than she had been previously. And that kind of signaled pushing the boundaries and showing that, life does not end just because you're not around. I am still young, I am still going to have fun, I have everything laid out for me, I am a queen regardless if I'm with you or not. And ladies, that's the attitude you want to signal, especially when the relationship is rocky and the man is unsure whether he wants to be with you or not. So she showed Prince William what he was missing, and eventually he did realize it too. So whether or not Kate actually needed some convincing to get back together with William, she acted like he had to work hard to get back with her, and that's a very important move that I want you ladies to really pay attention to, because if you're dealing with the world's most eligible bachelor, things cannot go that easy. He needs to understand where the boundaries are, and that just because he has the upper hand doesn't mean he has full control of the situation. Now, there is one part of the story that I personally don't like, and that's when, during that time of kind of on and off, being unsure, where's the engagement ring and that type of thing, the tabloids gave her a really rude nickname, calling her Waity Katie. And as we all know, the waiting did eventually pay off, but because Kate is a very discreet woman, you never hear her side of the story, you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, so you can't really tell for sure, was she just waiting around, or did she actually have more of an upper hand than we know? Anyway, we're never going to find out, but all we can say is that the waiting did pay off, and the couple announced their engagement in November of 2010, and in 2011 they married. So we all know the rest of the story, and the couple have now 3 lovely children who are now princes and princesses. So as a little reminder, Kate will become Queen Consort to King William, and her children and future descendants will carry on to be kings or queens. And this is an incredible achievement for women whose ancestors were coal miners and airline staff. And for me, this is why I wanted to really share this story with you today, because yes, certainly Kate did have support around her. But ladies, transformation can happen for anybody at any level. And to go back to the question that I asked myself a little while ago, did Kate really do the right thing? Being the weighty Katie and all of those things? Well, I think it doesn't really matter now, because she got what she wanted, didn't she? What I think it's important to look at, however, is that she actually did deploy a lot of grace, a lot of dignity, and she did set boundaries in her situation. Because if William had not come back to her and fully committed, she would have moved on, ladies. She showed this clearly during the time when they broke up. And no matter how strongly you feel sometimes about a relationship, it's important that you feel in your stomach that you have the courage to let go, and that you're not desperate to be with somebody, because then you are never going to be on their level. They are always going to have the upper hand, they're always going to have the power over you. And that's not a good basis for a future happy relationship either. Now ladies, the reason why I told you her story today is that I want you to understand that with the right strategy and with the right application, anyone can become anything. I have spent years telling you about my own transformation to inspire the belief in you, my dear elegant ladies, that anything is possible. Because it really is. Now, Kate Middleton really took it to the next level, and I hope that her story inspires you even more. You might not have aspirations to marry a prince, but all of the things that we learned in today's video can be applied in any situation. Now ladies, I will do more story times on famous transformation stories, so please leave me a comment below. Who would you like me to cover next? Plus, let me also know, what was your biggest takeaways from Kate's story? How could you apply the lessons of Kate's transformation in your life? Now ladies, in my next video that you really have to watch, if you enjoyed this one, then you must watch 5 signs that tell you're not upper class, because I'm sure Kate knows those things, and so should you. I will see you in that video.